वेलकम। तुम लोगों के और सब्जेक्ट्स में टेस्ट चल रहे हैं कि अभी हुए नहीं सबके? जयंतु सर हैज टेकन अ टेस्ट माइंड प्लानिंग। कौन से सब्जेक्ट्स के टेस्ट हो गए हैं तुम लोगों के? कोई बताओ। एमएससी हो गया? अरे वाह, ओके। अपना आरएसटी हो गया। और बस यही एमएससी आरएसटी टू ही। चलो। वेलकम एवरीवन। बस विल स्टार्ट इन फ्यू मिनट्स as soon as more students join. अरे आए नहीं कोई, 11 ओनली। टू लाइट। उसके बाद भी क्लास है ना? लास्टिंग टेक्नोलॉजी, अच्छा। ठीक है, 1 मोर मिनट फिर स्टार्ट करते हैं। अच्छा। So good afternoon everyone and welcome back. Today we are continuing our discussion on what are the various aspects of rock strength, rock types, various rock features in respect to the rock slope technology. We have discussed before how geological aspects were affecting the slope stability. We have seen how the data of various geological features is relevant to slope, and how these can be obtained and by field surveys or by various other means like drilling or coring or geophysical methods, right? Last time, I think we started introducing a bit about uh, what is the what are the methods that are relevant to now strength of a rock or the rock mechanical or geomechanical properties, right? So an important point to see there was we started discussing about the scale effect and how things change in perspective as well as in values when we move from a lower scale to a higher scale or vice versa, right? So we'll be taking that again, but quickly this time. And then we'll be moving to rock and rock mass and how these are relevant when we talk about a slope stabilization problem and why it is important that we need to know their differences. So I think we have touched it a bit when we discussed the basics of slope stability. But yes, in terms of technical point of view, we'll also see it today. Failure prominence, which failure to take care of, right? Like, for example, there can be discontinuities along which the failure can happen. There can be intact rock also that can fail under stress. And there can be a combination of that, and there can be so many other scenarios. So, which type of strength can be taken? Should we take the shear strength of the discontinuity, where the cohesion and friction are just the planar properties, like the friction is between the planes of the rock and cohesion is between the suppose the infilling material, or should we take the cohesion of cohesive strength of a rock, intact rock, or the internal angle of friction of the rock? When should those be taken? So prominence of failure, where the failure is happening, and according to that, how we decide that we'll also see. And we'll also see the effect of these properties of discontinuities, like how the cohesion, how the friction is basically affecting overall strength or overall consideration of the strength, either be it for a rock or for a rock mass. So how the discontinuities will be basically judging. So in terms of cohesion, will it be affecting that? In terms of friction, will it be affecting that? And so on, right? So we'll be taking these one by one and we'll see what these are. Why we are doing this now, why we are talking about rock strength is that one of the major factors uh, that we have already seen, like in simulation studies and various other ways in which we calculated factor of safety, we calculated in terms of probabilistic analysis. So in all these, we have seen how the strength, the cohesion, friction, and these material properties have been important for slope stabilization, right? So what uh, what exactly are these? How these are found out, and which of the factors basically define slope stabilization to a greater extent or to a lower extent, and so on. Okay, so we'll be seeing that. So let's start. So last time we were seeing this uh, friction angle and internal friction angle. One of the questions was there in our test also, that what is an internal friction, angle of friction? Is it a material property? Is it a superficial property, right? So geometrical property or in material property. So we were having that question. Now, friction angle and internal friction angle are as different as any two properties can be, but as similar as a small sand particle or a big sandstone can be. So, in order to give you a perspective, it's something that happens within our material, that is about the internal angle of friction, and something happens between the materials. It's about the friction angle. So this we discussed last time. So generally friction angle was calculated between two separate materials or two similar materials, but that are separated by a discontinuity or by a sliding contact surface these two features are generally not bound when we call about friction angle, right? And generally, the friction comes up when there is there in response to a force, external force that is applied, or if it is in motion and rubbing against any other material or surface, right? So, for example, the static angle of friction will be different, and the kinetic angle of friction will be different, right? So all these things we are already aware when in our basic physics. So the whole thing, whole point of friction angle is at what point the material will start sliding on a plane that is inclined at certain angle. So the easiest way to find any friction angle between any of these two materials is simply to find out the angle at which the one material slides over another, and this angle will be friction angle. So a mass property, bulk property that is representing the whole material and also being affected by what kind of surface it has, right? It can be a rough surface, will increase the amount of friction. It can be a very smooth surface, and that will decrease the amount of friction. Uh, when smoothness is considered, then the friction will basically be entitled upon the what kind of grain size do we have. Like, for example, if you slide a granite, very polished granite that we have on our counter slabs, right? And you slide against that, suppose a sandstone. So even though the surface can be as smooth as possible, there will be certain friction, and that friction will be dependent on the grain size of that material, on the distribution of those grains, how the matrix is there of these grains, right? And some other properties like if there is some asperities or roughness or other things are there. So that's a basic instinct about friction angle. But what is internal friction angle? So internal friction angle is similar to that, but that works on a very small scale on inside this material. So if we zoom in this material, and if we try to basically break this material by, suppose, uh, uh, pushing it on the two axes. So if you see in this way, if we try to maybe force in this direction and force in this direction, so there will be certain tendency to slide along a middle plane, right? And uh, that ways, one of the forces that will be opposing this motion will be the internal angle of friction. And how we calculate that? Very simply, we have seen this exercise being done. So calculating the internal angle of friction will be based on what kind of normal stresses are there. So what is the stress on this material that is confining this material here? And on the basis of that, what is the strength at which it breaks? So these two parameters, if we have some 2 or 3 points, we can have a good idea of what will be the cohesion, that is this part, and what is the friction, that is the slope of this angle, right? So cohesion can be easily calculated by testing this any material of a shear kind of failure with different normal reactions or the normal forces. So different confining forces, and it breaks at different shear stresses. And based on the shear stress versus normal stress curve, if we get 3 or more than that values, we can actually find out the cohesion and friction angle. Again, this we already discussed under the Moore-Coulomb failure criteria, right? So you are seeing that this full area was basically a Moore circle, Moore's envelope, and anything that any stress on that rock that will be within this envelope will be safe, and without this envelope or outside this envelope will be unsafe, or the rock may fail, right? So it's a material property. It's an internal property which basically acts within the material, and this is interparticulate motion. So here we were seeing there was a motion or the force that is external to the material. Here there is a force that is internal, and how this is done, maybe in response to a deformation, like this one we are applying stress. So a deformation or a stress, whatever happens, that will be the precursor for internal angular friction to shoot up. So that will be a component of the strength. So in this case, the shear strength that is there. So what is the difference? Basically a scale. And as we go for a higher scale, we go for similar properties, but in a different perspective. As we go for lower scale, we go for a similar properties in another perspective. And that is what is internal angular friction. So the scale and in between what kind of substances we are working on. That's a good understanding if we want to have about the difference between a friction angle and an internal friction angle, right? So let's move ahead. The similar concept of scaling we also apply when we look into what kind of rock we are seeing. When we go to a field and we see that rock is vastly jointed, so many joints are there. So the overall perspective, we may see that it is highly jointed rock. It's almost like fragile rock, like soil-like rock, or broken into many pieces. But as we go deeper or to a smaller scale, we will see that we can actually go to a scale where we will find an intact rock, and that will be the representative rock for this whole representative rock type for the whole area. But again, there is a difference between being an intact rock and being a rock that basically implies the actual properties of this whole slope, certain. So again, coming to the what scale we are working on. So if we say this is a open cast bench, open cast benching sort of slope, our slope is there that has like 4 benches here. And if we talk about very small scale, so we will find intact pieces of rock, right? Without any discontinuities, without much discontinuities, without much disturbances. And these are some samples that will be tested in laboratories because that's the scale it has. And when you take a sample and when you give the sample, suppose you take a core from here and take this hole out, what a technician will get is basically this portion, right? And this is an intact portion. This is not representing the whole area. What they will test is basically an intact rock, this one. And it will have the properties of the rock that it is, like sandstone will have certain properties of strength. It will certainly have very high shear strength or compressive strength as compared to soil, while much more higher strength rocks can be given like basalt or granite. Uh, uh, Again, whatever we get from laboratory testing will not be again representing the actual scenario. So do keep on correlating what I am saying with what kind of simulations we have done in computer applications and in this course as well. So in simulations, what you require is some sort of material properties like cohesion, friction, right? Unit weight, Poisson's ratio, Young's modulus, right? All these are obtained by laboratory testing. Now, what we are testing in laboratory and what we are feeding the data for the simulation work is quite different. Similarly, what we have in this actual scenario will be different from what we get in the form of intact rock. And that's why seeing the things in perspective is important. When we move ahead, like we move to a larger scale, suppose in a bench scale, we can see that the size or the maybe persistence of these joints or discontinuities is basically becoming to the same scale of the benches. So there may be chances now we are seeing there may be chances of some sort of planar sliding failure or maybe a wedge sort of formation based on what is the orientation of the joints, right? So we are seeing single joints or two sets of joints as we are moving outside or at a bigger scale. And as you move further, we are seeing that the amount of joints or the distribution of joints has already increased. And what we thought might be intact rock is no more an intact rock, but a set of very disturbed jointed rock mass, right? So that's the whole difference between the rock and a rock mass. When we move from a very small area that is mostly free from most of the disturbances of the geological disturbances to a larger area which have these and have these disturbances and are basically behaving as a combination of the intact and the discontinuous material. So that basically gives us the rock mass. So we need to always understand what we are dealing with. When we give our values, when we give our material properties in a simulation work, when we do our calculations while using empirical solutions, even though we may simplify for the sake of keeping things simple, but in actual practice, what we need is the rock mass properties and not just the rock properties. Rock properties are important and they will basically define what the rock mass will do. But what we feed or what we use for our calculations, for our estimations of slope stability is the rock mass properties. So do remember when you talk about rock and rock mass, how different they are, and what basic concept lag is there between when we make a distinction between a rock and a rock mass, and how any lab work that we do, like in rock lab, you will be testing samples while you will be, if suppose you have a problem of slope stability and you have some samples that are brought from the field, you will be testing them. But what you will be testing, you should be aware. Are you testing a rock? Are you testing a representative sample that has some discontinuities as well as rock? Right? Or are you testing just the soil part that you obtained that is totally discontinuous, full of so many discontinuities, is totally fragile and so on. So we have to be aware what we are working on, right? So that's why it is important to consider what we are doing, consider what we need, and apply accordingly, right? So that's rock mass and rock. Uh, based on based on that, and again based on what kind of uh, discontinuities are oriented or what kind of rocks are there, we may have different tendencies or prominence of failure. So suppose, for example, uh, in this very small scale, we have an intact portion of rock, which again, if this portion has any chance of failure, it will fail only when the intact rock fails completely, right? There is no discontinuity to basically make a weaker plane or to give any path of failure, right? So whatever failure will happen in the intact portion. When we go forward, we now take care of the discontinuities. So when there are discontinuities, prominent discontinuities present, for example, in this slope, a prominent discontinuity we can see is this, and a very probable, not exactly possible, but probable failure way can be a simple planar failure here, right? And otherwise, if we see a full slope which is so much discontinuous, we may be able to see a combination of failure that will be using the joints as well as the intact rock. So that case may also happen. So where which type of failure is prominent, that we have to consider based on what scale we are seeing and how separated the discontinuities are, what is the intact rock strength and so on. So some of the uh, some of the ways in which different types of discontinuities may behave, like for example, this scenario here, the prominence or of the failure type is only along uh, the discontinuities that are there. So even though we have a rock we have different intact rock surfaces, and we have the discontinuities as well, but the failure that we are seeing here right now is basically happening due to the failure along the discontinuity. So when we talk about the strength, we won't be able to say anything about the strength if we have only the rock data. But if we have the data for the discontinuity, suppose the cohesion between the in the discontinuity and the friction angle in the discontinuity, we can give some idea. Okay, the shear strength will be this, that this is the load, and if this is an inclination, then we can give a rough idea of what will be the safety factor and so on, right? As we have already done in many of the examples. So again, the same thing, that prominence, how prominent and which surface dominates the failure. So this, in this example, the dominance is along the main joint or the discontinuity that is there, right? There are other scenarios, like for example, this scenario. In this, we can see that the aperture size as compared to the previous one, the aperture of these discontinuities is quite, is relatively less, right? Very lightly drawn discontinuities are there, and even they are not persistent fully, right? So any probable failure that will happen due to this tensile crack that is developed will have to pass through the intact rock as well as the discontinuities. So this type of failure will be a combination of failure in intact rock and discontinuities. So the shear strength of the discontinuities will be in consideration, as well as the shear strength of these intact rock portion is also in consideration. So if suppose because they have already drawn it here, this is, if this is the tensile crack that is being developed, so any portion that is intact and that is connecting these discontinuities will be the primary surface for failure. If it would have been somewhere here, any crack might have been here initially, so it will be somewhere around like it is this, and then it will be failing on the intact portion, and it will be going along the discontinuity along the intact portion, and so on. So a combination of intact rock failure and the discontinuity failure. So here, when we talk about shear strength, we will also consider both of the cases, the shear strength of the rock as well as the shear strength of the discontinuity. Okay. When we see other scenarios, like for example, this one here, we have a soil or a very fragmented rock scenario, and this is basically resting on some big blocks of fragmented rock, but which can have a toppling kind of scenario. But what is actually happening is there is relative motion between the rock surfaces and the weathered rock surfaces. So not exactly along the discontinuities, but is basically taking portion of the overall weathered rock scenario. So now the strength of intact rock doesn't matter to us, right? Because there is no intact rock we are dealing with. This failure is basically representing the weathered condition rock. And that's why the most of the shear strength that we will consider will be the consideration of this weathered rock, as well as some of the consideration will also be with respect to the interaction with the joints with the weathered rock. So this kind of interaction, the joint and weathered rock interaction, will be there. So both of the shear factors, the shear strength of this weathered rock mass will, like suppose a soil sort of scenario, or and the interaction between the soil and the rock. So this is another kind of failure where different different components of shear strength will be considered. How, and another, let's say another example. So this one is almost a very weak rock type, can be considered as a very weathered rock type or a soil kind of there. And in this case, it is certainly what we see is almost a circular failure. And only thing that will be considered here is the strength of this material, and whatever the properties that we obtained will be representative even in the failure that we obtain here. So by all these examples, what we wish to see is which properties or which strength parameters we need to consider more. So suppose in this case, we just need to consider soil one. In this case, we consider soil as well as the interaction between soil and rock. In this, we consider intact rock as well as the discontinuity, right? And in this, we just consider the discontinuity. So what kind of failure we are experiencing and what are its properties, we have to keep in mind that. So what is the dominating mode of failure, and which kind of shear strength properties or the strength properties we have to consider in that sense, right? Any doubts until now? No? Okay. So based on this, we have to, like I said, many times decide which to take and which to leave. So a good example is what kind of failure we are seeing. So if we have a sliding kind of failure that we are seeing in terms of planar or wedge failure, uh, we can actually directly go for the strength of these uh, planes or the discontinuous planes, right? Discontinuity planes, because that's where the main failure is happening. So just use the discontinuity shear strength. While if that is not the case, sliding is not happening, but there is some sort of failure like a weak massive rock failure, it's a weak rock but massive one, and it's failing in maybe a combination of a circular or a combined sort of failure, or it is like a soil and it is basically completely failing in a circular fashion, or some combinations of these. We have to consider the rock mass strength. So full rock mass has to be considered. Rock mass, again, do remember, we are considering the intact rock as well as the discontinuities, how the combined behavior happens. Uh, so where we go for use of discontinuity, or in simple terms, where we go for friction angle, or where we go for internal angle of friction. So we have to be vigilant on that. So that's why we started with the discussion on internal friction angle, and there we have to choose which will be the prominent and which we use. There will be scenarios where more than one, like both of them will be used, but in special cases we have to consider or simplify sometimes as per our stability analysis requirement. Right. So so that's how we choose which mode of failure, or better than mode of failure, which mode of strength we give more consideration. This graph basically shows us a few of the scenarios or a few of the more Coulomb criterias of different combinations that we saw just now. What kind of different combinations we saw, right? So we see if we see a discontinuity that is rough and that is filled with this infilling material. So there will be certainly a cohesive force that will be there, right? And there will certainly be friction, even though there will be less friction because the infilling material will probably increase the lubricating effect, but the cohesion will be there because of this material, the infilling material, right? And if we plot anything between the effective normal stress and the shear stress, we will have this kind of linear to pseudo-linear curve that will have some cohesion, and that will have a relatively lower internal angle as compared to the other two cases we will be seeing just now. Lower friction angle. So lower friction angle basically means not so steep slope. So that's why the steepness is less, and that gives the cohesion. As soon as the infilling material goes away, and if the fracture or the discontinuity is smooth, smoothness basically means even though friction is lower, smoothness also means that the only friction that will be acting is due to the type of granular distribution of that rock. So suppose a sandstone and sandstone will give much uh, will give much sandstone and sandstone will give a higher friction. Granite and granite may have a lower friction angle, and other cases might be there. So based on what kind of distribution is there, mostly coarse grained material will have a higher friction angle. Fine grained material, very fine grained material like basalt or even granite will have relatively lower, not very low, but relatively lower friction angle, right? This we are talking about the discontinuities, right? Uh, so Nitesh asks, discontinuity strength failure will consider friction angle. Yes. So friction angle will be in discontinuity as we are seeing here. The friction angle again, as I was saying, is based on what kind of uh, the wall we have, right? What kind of rock is there on both of these sides. So both of these rocks, or because it's a discontinuity, the same rock, but what kind of rock it is there will dictate what kind of friction we'll get. So in case we have a smooth, clean fracture, we'll have some friction. However, we won't have cohesion because the infilling material is gone. And if there is a clean fracture, that means no infilling material. That means the cohesion will be zero. So the graph of the Mohr Coulomb envelope will be starting from zero. What basically it means is if you have no normal stress. So basically there will be no strength to that material because there is no friction, right? If there is no normal stress, there is no friction. So it can't support anything in no normal condition. So if you just press it, it will slide easily. No cohesion is there. So that is there. And friction increases as the normal stresses increases. If there is a smooth surface, the friction will be quite constant. But there can be a condition where there is a rough surface. Now, what is rough surface? Basically, the wall that is there of the discontinuity. So it can be having various what we say asperities or the irregularities, right? And even though there will be something of phi that we say is the representative angle of friction, these asperities also add on to these angle of friction. Like like for example, if we have a tooth kind of discontinuity, right? It won't be like that, but suppose it is, right? So even though the friction between these two will be represented by phi, phi, but the overall friction will be higher than phi because of these undulations or roughness. I'm increasing the scale to a bit, like zooming in on this kind of scenario. So if we try to move this and this against this surface, uh, so the friction that will be effective will be more than what it would have been if there was no undulations, right? So that's why a rough fracture will have higher friction, a higher effective friction, and that will lead to a higher strength material. As you can see in this envelope, even though it starts with C as 0 because there is no infilling material, so cohesion will be 0. But there will be certainly some relative high friction as compared to the smooth joints, right? When we come to rocks or rock masses, so fractured strong rock is basically what we mean here is it has some discontinuity and it has some intact portion, something like suppose a material is there and there is a discontinuity that goes till here, and this is the intact portion. So uh, if we don't have this already broken, the failure will be moving along a discontinuity to certain extent, right, and along the uh, non-broken or the intact portion. So that will be a representative way of thinking about a fractured strong rock. So the rock is strong if you say in that way, but uh, but the it is fractured in that sense. So it will have certainly have some cohesion because of the intact portion. Like assuming right now that the discontinuities don't have any infilling material, right? And intact portion will have some cohesion and certainly a uh, internal angle of friction along which it will go through, right? Now, when we are dealing with this rock, we are talking about the internal angle of friction, which are generally higher than the friction angle. But again, that is also based on what different parameters like the roughness of this joint or infilling material and so on. So for intact rock, generally we consider that the friction, representative friction angle will be representing the internal angle of friction. However, this curve you see is basically not straight after a point. It is after this point, it is basically becoming slightly shallower or decreasing in the slope. Why? This is because when as the effective normal stresses increase or the confining stresses that are increasing, what is happening is uh, the angle or the undulations which we saw here are basically breaking off. So if as much as the pressure is increasing, these are basically becoming flattened up, and that ways what is happening is even though there is relatively high friction, but as compared to the previous point, it reduces. And that's the whole fundamental of why the friction will also decrease when with increase in normal stress. Again, cohesion is there, but the friction is basically changing, and that's why the reason being that with more stress, the undulations basically break off. They become they shear off. So these will break off, and that will become something like this, a blunt tooth, and that's why the friction angle decreases. In the intact weak rock condition, we don't have any discontinuity here, high cohesion, right? And even though it is weaker, it still has a higher strength in this case as compared to the fractured rock, because the condition of discontinuity or the failure of discontinuity is not the priority here, right? So that's the reason. And so this one is intact rock when we are talking about when we are talking about the fractured rock. So we are talking about this friction angle will be representing the discontinuity. I'm sorry, I think I misspoke last time. The friction angle will be representing the discontinuity, and intact rock, the friction angle will be representing the internal angle of friction, right? That's why the initial slope will be different. So many conditions can be there. Again, this intact weak rock will also have a curvilinear path. Again, due to the same reason, as the normal stresses increases, the rough grain distribution that will be there inside these will basically shear off. So shearing will be there, and that's why the dilation or the decrease in friction angle will happen. So different scenarios are there, but their behavior can be understood by the fundamental mechanism that lies behind, right? And that's what is described here by all these diagrams. Uh, Let me quickly move ahead and show you a few things more. So When we when we consider if we are considering the shear strength or which shear strength to consider, as we are seeing, we have to see which if discontinuity has to be prominent or not. So prominence of discontinuity, like there are discontinuities that have to be seen, and if there is a failure and that is mapped or drilled, and that implies the shear failure along the discontinuity. What this means is, suppose we found that there are many discontinuities, and we plotted these discontinuities in a stereo net and found that our failure is basically it's falling in our planar zone. So if it is falling in our planar envelope, so then we have an idea that, okay, this discontinuity, whatever we are finding here, will be implying some sort of failure or planar failure or wedge failure or whatever is there. So when these kind of mapping is done, or we get a drilling data and we can again do the stereographic projection for that. If that is proven and there is a prominence of discontinuities, then and only then, uh, uh, in these kind of scenarios, we can go for uh, shear strength consideration of the discontinuity. If not, if suppose we have a condition that the failure is actually uh, due to this part and not due to this discontinuity, because the discontinuity is inclined at a higher angle than the slope angle, and we saw that when this is happening, it falls off the failure envelope, right? So when this is happening, now the consideration, because the failure can not happen due to these higher inclined discontinuities. So most of the major failure will happen in the intact portion, and hence then that time we won't consider the shear strength of the discontinuities. So when we do consider, we have to consider all these parameters as well, and that's why stereographic projections and all what we learned were important, because we have to consider only and only when there is a chance of failure or the failure is prominent in that sense, right? Uh, right. So considering now we have seen where to consider the discontinuities, how the shear strength is dependent on various properties of discontinuities. We can also see that properties of discontinuities like roughness, like cohesion, friction, and so on. So let us assume like we maybe had a material cord, and we found that discontinuity is there in between the rocks, and it is oriented basically in a normal direction to the stress condition. So basically what we mean is something like we have run a drilling operation maybe in a slope, right? Some slope might be there, and we have cored it, and we have found that there is one discontinuity plane running like this. And if we saw this section, basically this is representing here, right? Just the small portion where top portion and the bottom portion represents any rock that is there, representing rock, right? And the middle portion, the discontinuity, is lying in a horizontal direction, and some normal stresses are there and some shear stresses are being we are applying these shear stresses to see at what point this will fail. So there will be some cohesion due to the infilling material. We are assuming that there is infilling material as well, like it's a planar discontinuity, infilling material, and normal stresses are simulated based on what kind of overlying material was there. So we are seeing how the discontinuity will behave practically, right? And to do that, what we are doing is we are applying some normal load representing the field condition, and we are shearing it off. Shearing, how we are shearing? Basically, we are applying opposing loads to both of these sections, in this direction and in this direction. What happens is we get something like is a normal stress strain curve that we also see in rocks and soils, right? And when we see what happens is it reaches a peak strength, right? And after the failure, the peak shear strength that it reaches, it retains some of the strength, and that is the residual shear strength. Now, important point is there are two things here. It reaches a peak, after which generally in rocks what we see is there is a brittle sort of failure, right? It just suddenly releases and there is no load that it can take. It just breaks up. Or in soils, we can see similar residual behavior where certain strength it again keeps on having whatever the failure might have happened. So similar to the soils, we see a residual shear strength. That means after the failure also, minimum load it can bear some minimum load, right? Okay, if we plot, this is for a particular sigma or a particular normal stress value, right? If we plot various sigma like sigma 1, sigma like sigma A, sigma B, and so on, like so many different normal stresses, what we'll get is a different peak strength and a different residual shear strength, right? For different normal stress cases. So like just imagine if you have two rocks or two bricks and you can slide them against each other. If you press them hard, there will be higher resistance to sliding, right? And if you press them even harder, there will be more resistance to sliding and so on, right? So similarly, we are doing the test for how the discontinuity behaves, right? So if we plot all the peak strengths, peak shear strength with whatever the normal stress is there. So shear stress versus normal stress, what we find is there is the similar to what we got in the Mohr-Coulomb criteria. We are getting that same Mohr-Coulomb criteria, and we are getting some intercept that is representing the cohesion, and we are getting the slope that is representing the internal angle of friction, right? Very simple. Uh, so this is how we can actually get the discontinuity properties, right? Even in labs. So we do similar kind of tests. When we get some core samples, we do those tests and find out what is the properties of the properties of the discontinuities. So C and phi can be obtained, and based on C and phi, we can use these values in calculations. Now, another important part was the residual strength. Now, do remember when we talk about residual strength won't have any cohesion or the intercept on the y-axis. And why is that? Basically, we are overcoming cohesion already when we reach the peak strength. The there are two main components of the strength, right? The C, cohesion, and the phi, that is friction. So both of them are being overcome, but what the residual strength basically dictates is something like a residual friction angle. You can consider it like a kinetic friction angle in a broader case, like when we have a static angle of friction and a kinetic angle of friction. Similarly, we have residual internal angle of friction and the actual internal angle of friction. So if the residual angle of friction is basically responsible for the residual strength, and that's what it will keep on having whatever the stress may be, right? So that's how, even though things are very similar, the concept behind when we talk about the discontinuity, when we talk about the